My son, a mere 14 years old, rendered his father's new wife unconscious right there, amidst the solemn vows and celebratory cheers of their wedding day. And yes, despite the gravity of that statement, a fierce, unwavering pride surged through me, a mother's instinct, perhaps, or a deep-seated belief that there was more to this story than met the eye. The news didn't arrive gently, but rather through the clipped, urgent tone of my commanding officer. Your son, he'd stated, each word like a hammer blow, committed felony assault at his father's wedding. You need to get home now. The sterile efficiency of the military communication only amplified the surreal horror of the message, tearing through the disciplined calm of my deployment. I was stationed far away, on a sprawling military base nestled deep in Germany, a world away from the familiar comfort of home. It had been 8 grueling months since I last embraced my boys, 8 months of longing, of counting down the days until our reunion. Now, this devastating summons shattered the quiet anticipation. This was my teenage son. They were talking about the same gentle soul who, despite his formidable strength and athletic build, had deliberately quit wrestling. Unable to bear the thought of inflicting even minor discomfort upon an opponent, this compassionate boy, was now facing severe charges for what was described as a brutal assault on a woman, at the very altar of a wedding, no less. How could this be? What could possibly have transpired to push him to such an extreme? 18 agonizing hours later, after an emergency flight that felt like an eternity, depositing me back on American soil with a thud, I raced straight to my ex-husband's house. Even before I reached the front door, a stark, visceral reminder of the incident materialized. Dark, unsettling stains, undeniably blood, still marred the pristine concrete of the driveway. A grim welcome mat to the unfolding drama. My finger trembled slightly as I pressed the doorbell. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal my ex-husband, Conrad. His face, usually composed, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, every line etched deep with fury. His first words, delivered with a venomous snarl, cut through the tense silence. We're pressing charges, he declared, leaving no room for doubt about his intent. I'm not taking anyone's side until I've heard both versions of the story, I stated, my voice firm despite the churning in my gut, asserting my maternal authority. Without waiting for his reaction, I gently but resolutely pushed past his indignant form, my sole focus fixed on reaching my son. Stepping into the living room felt less like entering a home and more like stumbling into a grim, impromptu tribunal. Every face was turned toward the center, a silent, accusatory jury. Conrad's parents sat stiffly on the couch, their expressions etched with a mixture of shock and condemnation. His brother, Potter, leaned awkwardly by the unlit fireplace, radiating discomfort. His sister, Fen, retreated into the farthest corner, almost melting into the shadows. Looming protectively, like a pair of snarling guard dogs ready to pounce, stood the bride's parents. And there, starkly spotlighted in the room's unforgiving center, was Lauren, the alleged victim. Her nose was visibly splinted, 2 horrific black eyes gloomed across her face, and an array of bandages crisscrossed her bruised skin, a brutal testament to the violence she had endured. The scene was utterly chilling. Lauren was sobbing, theatrically dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, meticulously avoiding the swollen areas, a performance designed to elicit maximum sympathy. And then I saw him, my son, my 14-year-old, surrounded by this hostile mob, yet radiating an almost unnerving calm. This was the boy, remember, who, with an almost poetic sensitivity, refused to kill even the smallest insect. Convinced that creature might have been an ant he taught his little stepbrother origami in another life. The irony was a cruel twist of the knife. He sat perfectly straight, his spine rigid, chin defiantly raised, meeting my gaze directly. There was not a flicker of remorse in his eyes, no trace of fear or confusion. Instead, a profound, almost unsettling sense of pride shone in their depths, an open declaration that he stood by his actions, whatever they might have been. It was baffling, yet compelling. Your son, Conrad spat, venom lacing every syllable, his voice barely controlled, has utterly destroyed our family. Just look what he did to her face. Lauren, sensing the shift in attention, ratcheted up her sobbing, her cries growing louder, more desperate. He's an animal, she whimpered, her voice laced with feigned terror. They're trying him as an adult, right? Conrad's father, Grandpa, shook his head in a display of theatrical disgust. His judgment already sealed, I turned my gaze back to my son, a knot tightening in my stomach. His knuckles were still visibly bruised and swollen, undeniable evidence of the force he had used. In that moment, looking at the physical toll, with only their accusations ringing in my ears, it was difficult to reconcile this image with the boy I knew. There seemed, at first glance, to be no conceivable excuse for such a violent outburst, but my resolve held firm. Tell me, I urged him, my voice cutting through the accusations. What's your side of the story? He didn't rush. Instead, he slowly, deliberately scanned the room, his eyes lingering on each accusing face, soaking in the collective animosity. The silence stretched, thick and pregnant with expectation. Then, he spoke, his young voice cutting through the tension, remarkably clear and steady. You want to know the truth? He asked, his question hanging in the air like a challenge, before delivering the bombshell. She's been molesting me for 6 months. That's why I did it. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow.
Scritch.
My world, my very understanding of reality, ground to an instantaneous, terrifying halt. But the room, in stark contrast, exploded with a cacophony of gasps, shouts, and disbelief. The fragile piece shattered beyond repair. Liar, someone shrieked. Disgusting. Another voice boomed. How dare you utter such vile accusations? The air crackled with indignant fury. For a fleeting second, Lauren's carefully constructed mask of victimhood slipped, a flicker of something unsettling crossing her features, before she expertly regained control and wailed even louder. "He's making it up," she screeched, her voice shrill with feigned outrage. "I've been nothing but loving and supportive." The performance was masterfully executed, a desperate attempt to drown out the truth. Lauren's mother, a woman who moments before had seemed a picture of dignified grief, lunged forward, her finger jabbing accusingly at my son's chest. "You evil little," she began, her voice dripping with vitriol. But before she could finish, her husband, Lauren's father, a man I now scrutinized with newfound suspicion, seized her arm, his grip surprisingly firm. His face was a ghastly pale, not of shock, but as if he'd been dreading this exact, inevitable moment. It was a subtle, yet profoundly telling gesture. In the midst of this escalating chaos, my son, with a chillingly calm resolve, pulled out his phone. His thumb expertly swiped, navigating to a hidden folder, a digital sanctuary concealing his truth. "She told me," he stated, his voice now trembling with a raw, barely contained fury that 14-year-old boys always wanted. "She said I should be grateful." As I leaned over his shoulder, glimpsing the unspeakable images flashing across the screen, fragments of undeniable proof. Captured in secret, my stomach lurched violently, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. The horror was palpable. Conrad, who had been so quick to condemn, now stared at the phone screen, his hands visibly shaking, a desperate tremor running through him. Those could be anyone," he stammered, his words stumbling over each other. "Anyone could have made those up." But his voice was hollow, devoid of conviction, sounding precisely like an actor poorly delivering lines from a script he utterly disbelieved. The denial was flimsy, transparent. Lauren, in a sudden surge of panic, lunged forward, her hand darting out to snatch the phone. "Those are completely out of context," she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. I was only her words trailed off abruptly, her eyes widening in a dawning horror as she realized her own frantic defense had, in fact, just unequivocally admitted the damning images were undeniably real. The truth, in that instant, was out. My son, fueled by a raw, long-suppressed rage, finally stood up, his body trembling with the intensity of his emotion. "Dad," he cried, his voice now a guttural roar, "I told you. 3 months ago, I told you everything. And what did you say? You said she's just being affectionate." Conrad visibly crumpled, his carefully constructed composure shattering. He started to stutter. "I didn't. I thought." But his son cut him off, turning his accusing gaze to his grandfather. "Grandpa," he articulated, each word a painful accusation. "You laughed. You said, 'Lucky boy, wish I had that problem at 14. The casual cruelty of the remark, now exposed, hung heavy in the air. Grandpa's face, which had been ruddy with anger, drained instantly to an ashen white. He slowly turned his head, first to Lauren, then back to his grandson, his eyes wide with dawning horror and undeniable shame. In that agonizing moment, something profound and irreparable crumbled in his expression, his previous arrogance dissolving into a mask of abject regret. "And Aunt Fen," he articulated, his voice now a raw, painful rasp, "you were the one who just told me, 'Don't be so dramatic.' You made me feel like I was exaggerating everything." As he spoke, I noticed a young man, then perhaps a cousin or another relative present, slowly backing toward the door, his face a mask of dawning horror, tears freely streaming down his cheeks. Oh God," he murmured, his words heavy with a nascent understanding of the unspeakable. My son then fixed his unwavering gaze on Uncle Potter, a profound betrayal etched into his young features. "And Uncle Potter," he continued, his voice shaking with the weight of his revelation, "I thought you were just a cool uncle, someone I could trust. But even you said I should be grateful for her attention. You dismissed my pain as a lucky problem." Potter, who moments before had seemed so detached, now buried his head in his hands, his posture one of utter defeat. "Jesus Christ," he mumbled, his voice muffled by his palms. "I was only joking. I swear I didn't know she was actually." He trailed off, the unspoken horror hanging heavy in the air, his feeble excuse a testament to his guilt. And then, his gaze fixed on his grandmother, he delivered the final, crushing blow. "Grandma," he choked out, his voice a raw whisper, "you were the one who told me boys can't be raped by women." The matriarch, who had exuded such moral authority, visibly deflated. She collapsed onto the couch, her hands instinctively clutching rosary beads, her lips moving in frantic, whispered prayers, a desperate plea for divine absolution for her own complicity. He looked around the room, his eyes blazing with a newfound, terrible clarity. "Every single one of you," he declared, his voice rising, "every single adult in this room told me to shut up about it." The air crackled with shattered illusions. Across the room, Lauren's parents were locked in a furious, hushed argument, their whispered words barely audible, yet charged with panic. Her father's voice, however, was a sharp, chilling hiss. "Not again, Patricia. You promised me she was better." The word again, pregnant with horrifying implications, hung heavy and ominous in the suddenly suffocating silence, revealing a darker, disturbing history. But then, my son, with an astonishingly calm yet utterly devastating conviction, cut through the escalating confessions and denials. "But that's not why I hit her," he stated. The room, which had been a maelstrom of accusations and despair, immediately froze, every single person paralyzed by this new, unexpected declaration. "What do you mean?" I managed to stammer, my own voice barely a whisper. "That's not why." A new wave of dread washed over me, chilling me to the bone. What else could there possibly be? Last week, he continued, his voice now devoid of emotion, the trauma palpable. I caught her, Lauren, sneaking out of Tommy's room at 2 o'clock in the morning. He paused. Letting the word sink in, Tommy. He's 9. My blood ran instantly, terrifyingly cold, a thick, icy dread solidifying in my veins. Tommy, my other son, my ex-husband's precious 9-year-old boy, was now implicated. The horror had just intensified beyond anything I could have imagined. In that damning instant, Lauren's carefully constructed mask, her entire facade of victimhood and innocence, finally slipped entirely, revealing the chilling monster beneath. That little brat came onto me. She shrieked, her voice stripped of all pretense, oozing with venom and self-preservation. Conrad, reeling from this unspeakable accusation against his own child, violently grabbed her by the shoulders, his face a contorted mask of pure, visceral horror. What did you just say? He roared, his voice raw with disbelief and burgeoning rage. For the very first time, a flicker of genuine, raw fear, stark and undeniable, flashed across Lauren's eyes, replacing all her previous histrionics. My son, who had maintained such stoic composure through his own ordeal, now finally broke down, unleashing a torrent of ugly, gasping sobs that tore at my heart. The morning of your wedding, Dad, he cried, his words punctuated by ragged breaths, I begged you. I told you, and you just said, not today. His anguish was profound. I knew, he continued, his voice a broken whisper, that nothing I could say, no words, no pleas, would ever stop her from hurting Tommy, so I stopped her the only way I knew how. The only way I could. With a renewed sense of purpose, my son abruptly wiped the tears from his face, a fierce determination replacing his sorrow, and bolted upstairs. Moments later, he reappeared, carefully descending the stairs, carrying a trembling Tommy in his arms. The little boy, looking utterly fragile and terrified, buried his face deep into his older brother's shoulder, seeking desperate comfort. Tommy, I asked, my voice barely steady, my heart aching with a fresh wave of dread, did Lawrence touch you? The small head, still hidden, gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Then, with a heartbreaking slowness, Tommy pulled up the leg of his pajama shorts, revealing a constellation of dark, angry bruises blooming across his inner thighs, irrefutable, sickening proof of the horror he had endured. The silence in the room was absolute, pregnant with collective guilt and shock. The dam finally broke. Lauren's mother, her face ashen, erupted in a guttural scream directed at her daughter, a shriek filled with a horrifying mixture of rage and agonizing self-reproach. You promised us. You promised you went to therapy. You promised this would never happen again. The chilling implication of her words echoed through the stunned room. This wasn't Lauren's first transgression. Lauren herself stood there, utterly exposed, every shred of her carefully constructed facade finally stripped away. Her bruised face, once a canvas for faint tears, was now twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated contempt, a chilling reflection of her true, monstrous nature. It was at this devastating peak of revelation that my son spoke again, his voice clear and resonant, slicing through the stunned silence. We're just children, he declared, his gaze sweeping over every guilty adult in the room, and every single adult in this room chose her over us. Without a moment's hesitation, my hand instinctively went to my phone, dialing 911. The room erupted again, this time with desperate pleas. Lauren's family, their faces now contorted with fear for their own reputations, started to beg, trying to negotiate, offering to drop all charges against my son. But their words were just a meaningless hum, utterly lost to my ears. I wasn't listening. My focus was singularly fixed on justice for my boys. It was at that precise moment of chaos that Lauren, seizing a sliver of opportunity, bolted toward the bathroom, disappearing behind the closed door. I had no idea what she was frantically doing in there, nor did I care. My mind was solely on the children. Barely 10 minutes later, she emerged, her composure somewhat restored, just as the first uniformed officers arrived at the door. With a swift, professional efficiency, they took her into custody, leading her away from the scene of her crimes. Gently and carefully, I gathered my son and Tommy, their small hands clinging to mine, and drove them straight to the sanctuary of my best friend's house, a place where they could finally feel safe. But our fleeting sense of peace was brutally short-lived. Barely 2 hours later, my phone rang. It's insistent but shattering the quiet calm. It was a detective, his voice gravely serious, devoid of any pleasantries. We need you at the station immediately, he stated, each word a cold, unwelcome premonition. My stomach churned, twisting into agonizing knots as I drove, my mind racing with a fresh wave of anxiety. They didn't take me to a waiting area. Instead, I was led directly into a sterile, intimidating interrogation room. The chilling truth soon began to unravel. Whatever diabolical scheme Lauren had concocted, whatever malicious evidence she had planted on her phone during her hasty bathroom retreat, it had somehow, inexplicably, entangled me in this web of legal peril. I was about to discover, in the most terrifying way imaginable, that the monsters, she, just like a master manipulator, always seemed to possess a meticulously crafted backup plan. The detective, a man whose stern features offered no comfort, led me down a narrow, dimly lit hallway. The air hung heavy with a cloying scent of stale coffee mingled with industrial floor cleaner, an institutional odor that seemed to seep into my very bones, making the already suffocating atmosphere even more oppressive. He pushed open a door, revealing a small, stark room furnished only with a cold, metallic table and unforgiving plastic chairs. The starkness amplified my growing sense of dread. Without a word, he slid a thin manila folder across the table. Its edges were worn, its contents unknown, yet it radiated an ominous energy. "Take a look," he instructed, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, fumbled with the folder. Each finger felt clumsy, unresponsive, as if betraying my desperate attempt to appear calm. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I finally managed to pry it open. Inside were not documents, but glossy screenshots, images captured directly from a phone screen. They depicted a series of text messages, seemingly exchanges between me and Lauren. My breath caught in my throat. The words on the screen were a chilling fabrication, a twisted narrative designed to implicate me. They showed messages where I purportedly gave her carte blanche to handle my son however she needed to during my deployment. One message, particularly damning, explicitly stated my absolute, unwavering trust in her judgment completely about discipline. Another, equally insidious, declared that teenage boys needed firm boundaries and that I was relying implicitly on her to establish and enforce them. I stared at these messages, a cold wave of disbelief washing over me. Every fiber of my being screamed that these were lies, vile inventions. My brain, reeling from the shock, simply couldn't process the grotesque charade unfolding before my eyes. How could these exist? How could such venomous lies be attributed to me? The timestamps on the screenshots added another layer of chilling precision. They were dated 3 months prior, precisely when my son first confided in Conrad about the horrific events. It was a calculated, deliberate act. The detective, a silent sentinel, sat across from me, his gaze unblinkingly fixed on my face, meticulously dissecting every flicker of emotion. He finally broke the silence, explaining, with an almost clinical detachment, that these damning screenshots had been uncovered during a forensic search of Lauren's phone following her arrest. Then came the questions, sharp and direct, cutting through the haze of my shock. "Did you give Lauren permission to discipline your son physically?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. The very notion sent a jolt of ice through my veins. And then, a question so vile, so utterly depraved, it made my stomach turn. "Did you give her permission to engage in sexual contact with him as a form of teaching or punishment?" "Absolutely not," I vehemently declared, my voice raw with indignation and disbelief. I never sent those messages. My anger, mingled with a desperate need for vindication, surged. "I demand to see my phone records from the carrier," I insisted, my voice trembling but firm. "To prove this is all a heinous lie." His response was immediate, and it brought another wave of dread. "They would need to confiscate my phone," he explained, "for comparison and forensic analysis." It was at that precise moment, as his words hung heavy in the air, that the terrifying truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't merely a distraught parent, a concerned witness reporting abuse. I was now a potential suspect. They were investigating me, not as a victim's parent, but as a possible accomplice. How quickly the roles could change, transforming a grieving father into a potential co-conspirator. They escorted me to another sterile room, different from the first, where a technician, efficient and impersonal, began to process me. My hands were photographed from every conceivable angle, the camera flashed a blinding, intrusive pulse. Then came the chilling ritual of identification. Each finger was rolled meticulously in cold, black ink, leaving its unique whorls and ridges on stark white cards. "We need to rule you out as an accomplice to the crime," the technician stated matter-of-factly, his tone devoid of judgment. Yet the word accomplice echoed in the small room, making my stomach churn with a sickening lurch. It was clear. Lauren, that venomous spider, was trying to drag me into her dark web, attempting to create a plausible illusion that I was not only aware of, but had actively approved of her monstrous actions. For the next 3 agonizing hours, the interrogation continued, a relentless barrage of questions about my relationship with Lauren. When had we first met? How frequently did we communicate? What were the exact nature of our conversations? Had I ever, even in passing, discussed her methods with my son? They wanted every minute detail, every nuance of our interactions, dissecting our connection under a powerful, accusatory microscope. Had I ever discussed discipline strategies with her? They pressed. Had I noticed any changes in my son's behavior? Why hadn't I rushed home sooner if I suspected something was amiss? Every single question felt like a carefully laid trap, each word a potential landmine designed to extract confession or, at the very least, create further suspicion. Was there a right answer, or just answers that could ultimately incriminate me? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they released me, but not without conditions. My phone remained in their custody, a digital hostage, and I was explicitly instructed not to leave town. As I walked out of the station, the oppressive feeling clung to me like a shroud. The walls seemed to literally be closing in, the air outside still heavy with the unspoken accusations. I drove instinctively, almost blindly, straight to the law office of Casey Maple Grove, a name whispered to me by a trusted friend as a beacon of hope. Casey, a woman with perceptive eyes, took one look at my face me raw, exposed despair and, without a moment's hesitation, immediately cleared her entire schedule. She ushered me into her surprisingly warm and reassuring office, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the police station. Here, amidst the scent of aged paper and quiet professionalism, she encouraged me to recount everything from the very beginning. I poured out the entire horrifying saga, the wedding, the soul-shattering revelations from my son, and now these insidious, fabricated messages. As I spoke, Casey listened intently, her fingers flying across her keyboard, typing rapidly, methodically, her actions a tangible manifestation of her strategic mind. She didn't waste a single moment. She immediately filed preservation orders with all the major phone carriers and social media companies, locking down potential evidence before it could be deleted or altered. She then offered a chillingly plausible explanation. Lauren, in those fleeting 10 minutes she had spent alone in the bathroom while the police were converging, had likely used sophisticated spoofing applications or meticulously edited screenshots, crafting her malicious defense. Casey emphasized the critical need to obtain the actual phone records directly from the carrier. These, she asserted, would be our irrefutable proof that the messages were nothing more than a desperate, digital forgery. Furthermore, she filed requests for Lauren's search history, a strategic move to uncover any queries about how to fake text messages or similar nefarious searches. Casey's advice was unequivocal. I was not to utter another word to the police without her present. Lauren, she explained, was clearly attempting to muddy the waters, a desperate, calculated maneuver to create reasonable doubt for her own defense, to drag me down into the abyss with her. The very next morning, Derek Okage from Child Protective Services CPS arrived at my friend's house, where we were currently seeking refuge. His visit was a sobering reminder that the official investigation was relentless. He needed to interview both boys separately, a standard procedure designed to ensure the veracity of their statements. Derek, while gentle in his approach, was undeniably thorough in his questioning. He guided my son through every harrowing detail, starting from the very first time Lauren had violated his space, creeping into his room under the cloak of night. My son recounted, with a chilling calmness, how she would deliberately wait until Conrad, my friend's son, was sound asleep, a predatory tactic designed to isolate and terrorize. He spoke of the terrifying threats she had made, the psychological change she had wrapped around him, should he ever dare to reveal her monstrous actions to anyone. Derek, with a solemn expression, meticulously transcribed every word, his pen scratching across the pages, and had my son sign each one, a testament to the weight of his truth. Following that emotionally draining interview, Derek then spoke with Tommy, my younger son, in a separate room. The little boy was visibly scared, clutching a small, worn toy, but he bravely recounted the times Lauren had come to his room. He then, with a heartbreaking innocence, showed Derek the bruises, still healing, blooming across his small legs, mottled greens and fading purples, silent testament to his pain. Derek, with a quiet professionalism, photographed every single mark, carefully documenting their size, shape, and evolving coloration. As I reflected on these horrifying new details, a gnawing suspicion began to fester in my mind about Lauren's seemingly innocuous trip to the bathroom. 10 minutes. 10 minutes is an exceptionally long time to simply sit idly by, knowing that law enforcement officers are moments away from entering the house. What intricate web was she spinning in that seemingly mundane bathroom visit? And then a dark thought resurfaced, her mother's desperate outburst, "Not again." And therapy, it echoed in my ears, a chilling and witting confession. It made me wonder, with a cold dread, how many times this woman, this monster, had done this before, how many other innocent children had fallen victim to her predatory patterns. To ensure a comprehensive investigation, Derek later arranged for a nurse practitioner to conduct a full physical examination on both boys. After these exhaustive interviews, Derek sat down with me, his expression grave, to explain the next, difficult steps. He was implementing a safety plan, a measure designed to protect the boys while the investigations continued. This plan, he explained, would permit me only supervised contact with both my sons, meaning I would have to meet with them at the CPS office, always with a social worker present. It felt utterly humiliating, a stripping of my fundamental parental rights to require supervision just to see my own children. Yet, my agreement was immediate and unwavering, because their safety, their well-being, was, and always would be, the only thing that truly mattered. Derek offered a small measure of reassurance, explaining that the criminal case against Lauren would proceed unequivocally, regardless of the trajectory of the investigation into my potential involvement. He affirmed that the boys' disclosures were credible and consistent with abuse, their words carrying undeniable weight. The physical evidence on Tommy, he added, powerfully corroborated their statements. However, his voice held a cautionary note as he delivered a final, chilling warning. Lauren's defense attorney, in a desperate bid to salvage her case, would undoubtedly attempt to exploit those fake messages, aiming to claim that I was, in fact, involved or complicit in her heinous actions. At least culpably negligent, the subsequent days blurred into a disorienting paradox, moving at a breakneck speed yet agonizingly slow, each ticking second stretching into an eternity. It was a whirlwind of legal maneuvering and emotional processing, where progress felt both impossibly swift and painstakingly drawn out. My attorney, Casey, a woman whose tenacity rivaled that of a seasoned detective, managed to secure the comprehensive phone records directly from my carrier. What they revealed was a pivotal turning point, irrefutably proving I had never sent those damning messages. The raw metadata, that invisible digital fingerprint, laid bare the truth. The messages hadn't originated from my device at all. Instead, they had been meticulously crafted and sent from Lauren's phone, specifically utilizing a surreptitious third-party application designed for digital deception. This wasn't merely a mistaken identity. It was a premeditated act of fabrication. And the chilling discoveries didn't stop there. With a forensic precision that was both admirable and unsettling, Casey delved deeper. She uncovered a digital breadcrumb trail on Lauren's personal laptop, revealing a disturbing pattern of targeted online searches. Lauren had exhaustively researched phrases like how to fake text messages for court, a glaring testament to her manipulative intent. Along with various spoofing apps that look real, the meticulousness of her planning sent shivers down my spine. She wasn't just reacting, she was actively constructing a false reality. Then a week, an almost surreal week, before the anticipated wedding, the phone call came. It was the police detective, delivering news that offered a sliver of relief, yet still left me ensnared in the legal labyrinth. He informed Casey that, based on their findings, I was officially no longer considered a suspect in the initial allegations. But the shadow hadn't entirely lifted. I remained a key witness, a role that, while less incriminating, still anchored me to this unfolding nightmare. What depths of manipulation had I truly witnessed without even realizing it? I was still in the precinct parking lot, the asphalt shimmering under the afternoon sun, when my phone vibrated with an unfamiliar, yet immediately recognizable, intensity. The screen displayed a military number, the telltale prefix of officialdom. A cold dread seeped into my veins even before I answered. On the other end was Chandler Burgrove, a voice of measured authority from Judge Advocate General. His words were precise, sterile, and utterly devastating. My security clearance, the very bedrock of my career, was now under review due to the ongoing investigation. It was a phrase that hung in the air, dense with unquantifiable consequences. He relayed that my emergency leave, granted amidst this personal chaos, was indeed extended. But this extension came with a heavy caveat. I was placed on administrative hold. This wasn't a temporary pause. It was a complete freeze, a crippling inability to return to duty, to the structured world I knew, until this mess was cleared up. A mess that felt less like a tangled string and more like a Gordian knot, tightening around my entire existence. I slumped deeper into the driver's seat of my car, the metallic scent of the interior suddenly suffocating. My career, the purpose and stability I had painstakingly built, felt like it was dissolving into thin air, a house of cards collapsing under an unseen pressure. And the irony was a bitter pill. This unraveling was happening precisely when my children, particularly Tommy, needed my unwavering presence, my absolute strength, more than ever before. What kind of parent would I be if I couldn't even stand on my own 2 feet? The silence of the parking lot was abruptly shattered by the insistent ring of my phone. It was Casey again, her voice brimming with a renewed sense of purpose. She had, through sheer force of will and legal acumen, managed to obtain copies of those same fake screenshots Lauren had so brazenly presented to the police. As she examined them on her computer screen, her sharp eye immediately caught the first glaring inconsistency. The font was wrong, she stated, her voice tight with vindication. Completely mismatched for your phone model. It was a small detail, but a damning one. A crack in Lauren's carefully constructed facade. The timestamp formatting, another crucial piece of digital evidence, was also entirely inconsistent with genuine messages, and the spacing between some of the text shifted haphazardly, betraying the clumsy hand of forgery. Without a moment's hesitation, she'd already mobilized Corey Sedlin, a digital forensics maestro renowned for his almost magical ability to unmask fabricated electronic evidence. He was the expert, the wizard who could peer into the digital realm and distinguish truth from illusion. Casey, propelled by this crucial breakthrough, was literally driving over to her office at that very moment, eager to hand over everything to Corey for a proper, thorough examination. The tide, perhaps, was beginning to turn. Meanwhile, a separate, equally harrowing chapter of this ordeal was unfolding. A call came from Devin Pinehire, a compassionate voice from Victim Services. She had, with remarkable efficiency, arranged for Tommy to undergo a crucial medical examination at the Children's Hospital that very afternoon. My heart ached as I drove him there myself, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. But when we reached the sterile, brightly lit exam room, a new wave of helplessness washed over me. I was told, gently but firmly, that I had to wait in the hallway. It was standard procedure, I knew, but watching Tommy, so impossibly small and vulnerable, walk through that door with only the nurse and doctor, the world felt like it was tilting on its axis. He was entering a space that would probe the deepest hurts, and I couldn't be there to hold his hand. For 3 agonizing hours, I became a phantom in that hallway, a restless shadow of a parent. I paced, a ceaseless, anxious dance, my eyes darting to my phone every few minutes, as if willing it to ring with news, any news. My mind, a frantic battlefield, fought a desperate war against the intrusive, terrifying thoughts of what they might find, what hidden traumas might be unearthed. Twice, a kind nurse emerged, bearing small juice boxes for Tommy, and each time, I caught a fleeting, heartbreaking glimpse of him. He was perched on the exam table, dwarfed by the sterile white hospital gown, his small frame a stark symbol of his vulnerability. When the door finally opened for the last time, a wave of mingled relief and terror washed over me. Tommy walked out, clutching a plush stuffed bear they'd given him, a small, soft comfort in the face of such a harsh reality. But his eyes, those windows to his young soul, refused to meet mine, a silent testament to the ordeal he had just endured. Devin followed him out, a thick, imposing folder of documentation clutched firmly in her hand. Her voice, though gentle, carried the weight of profound gravity. They found evidence, she confirmed, consistent with his disclosure. The words, though expected, still landed like a physical blow, confirming our worst fears, solidifying the horror. The quiet, unspoken truth was now documented, undeniable. Suddenly, my phone began to buzz incessantly, a furious cascade of voicemails from Conrad. His messages were a chaotic storm of self-pity and misplaced rage, a testament to his unraveling grasp on reality. He was, as the phrase goes, losing his mind over the restrictions now placed on seeing Tommy. The new safety plan, a legal bulwark erected to protect our son, mandated that all his visits with Conrad be fully supervised. Conrad's voice, amplified by my voicemail, was a torrent of accusations, screaming about how this was all my fault. His first message was a venomous accusation, blaming me for turning our son against Lauren. A moment later, a complete reversal. His second message, surprisingly, hurled condemnation at Lauren herself, branding her a predator. But his moral compass spun wildly again in the third message, where he unbelievably blamed our son for ruining his wedding. And then, in a dizzying display of emotional acrobatics, the fourth message swung back to me, accusing me of not warning him about Lauren. A cruel irony considering I had literally just discovered the extent of her deceit myself. It was a dizzying, sickening cycle of blame, shifting from one innocent party to another, never truly landing on his own complicity or failure to see. His parents, too, were calling, their names flashing on my screen, but I deleted those voicemails without a second thought, my emotional capacity utterly drained. That very same day, with a swiftness that spoke volumes of her family's financial resources and legal maneuvering, Lauren posted bail using her parents' money. And within a mere handful of hours, her lawyer had already filed a restraining order against me. The paperwork, a meticulously crafted tapestry of lies, outrageously claimed that I had orchestrated the whole situation to get custody of Tommy. It even went so far as to accuse me of coaching my son to attack her. She was, in a classic display of victim blaming, expertly painting herself as the innocent casualty of a jealous ex-wife scheme. Casey, with a weary sigh that bespoke years of experience with such tactics, confirmed my grim suspicion. This is typical predator behavior, she explained, her voice devoid of surprise, trying to flip the narrative, distort the truth. It was a grotesque inversion of reality. The very next morning brought another agonizing step in this relentless journey. My son's Child Protective Services (CPS) interview with Derek Okage at the Specialized Children's Advocacy Center. I watched, my heart heavy, as Tommy bravely walked into that small, clinically designed room, equipped with discreet cameras. There, with remarkable clarity and an almost uncanny precision, he recounted everything to Derek. He gave exact dates, detailing precisely when he had first confided in his dad about the abuse, a heartbreaking 3 months ago. He remembered, with chilling accuracy, the specific, dismissive words his grandfather had used when he had laughed it off, brushing away his grandson's pain as if it were a trivial matter. He knew what his aunt was wearing the day she had coldly instructed him not to be dramatic, silencing his cries for help. He even recalled the exact TV show that was playing in the background when his uncle had told him he should be grateful, a cruel twisting of gratitude into an obligation to endure suffering. Derek, a stoic and attentive figure, meticulously documented every detail, constructing an official, damning timeline of every adult who had been told of Tommy's torment and had so tragically failed to act. It was a sobering, infuriating indictment of their willful blindness. The safety plan implemented in the wake of these revelations dramatically reshaped our lives. It stipulated that both boys, Tommy and his brother, had to stay with me at my friend's house, a temporary sanctuary, but one governed by strict rules. We were only allowed there during approved hours, a bureaucratic phrasing that underscored the loss of our normal family life. We settled into a strange, disjointed routine, a life cleaved into rigid segments. I would arrive promptly at 7 o'clock in the morning, my friend's kitchen already bustling, to get them ready for school. Then, like a ghost, I would have to leave as soon as they boarded the bus, the emptiness of the house a stark reminder of our fragmented existence. I'd return at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my heart leaping with relief to see them home, but even this reunion was fleeting. I was forced to leave again at 8 o'clock every single night, a wrenching departure that killed me in a way words could barely convey. Why so agonizing? Because that was precisely when Tommy's nightmares, the horrific echoes of his trauma, would frequently seize him, leaving him terrified and inconsolable. My friend, bless her heart, would faithfully text me updates, her messages detailing his tearful cries for me, his desperate pleas for my comforting presence. But the cruel decree of the safety plan was absolute. I wasn't allowed to come back until the first light of morning. We endured this excruciating limbo for weeks, trapped in a seemingly endless cycle of waiting for court dates, waiting for investigations to painstakingly inch forward, waiting for a resolution that felt perpetually out of reach. Then, an email landed in my inbox, its subject line innocuous, its content utterly sickening. It was from Tommy's school counselor, a compassionate woman who, sensing something amiss, had taken the initiative to pull his academic and attendance records stretching back a full year. What she discovered was a chilling, undeniable pattern, clear, disturbing changes beginning approximately 6 months prior. A timeline that precisely coincided with Lauren's insidious move into their home. His grades, once a consistent beacon of A's, had plummeted to disheartening C's, a stark academic decline. And from a child who had never once missed school, he had accumulated a staggering 12 absences. His homeroom teacher had noted in her observations that he had become profoundly withdrawn, a quiet shadow of his former self, and had entirely stopped participating in class. Another teacher documented an even more alarming side. He had begun falling asleep at his desk, his young body and mind overwhelmed by an unseen burden. The counselor, acting on these worrying signs, had even called Conrad to discuss her concerns, but his response had been dismissive, minimizing Tommy's distress as merely adjusting to having a new stepmom. All these glaring warning signs, meticulously documented and ignored, now screamed at me from the screen. Each one a testament to the fact that while that monster was actively hurting him, the adults around him had failed to see, to hear, to protect. The rage, sharp and cold, settled deep in my bones. Just as I wrestled with this fresh wave of anguish, Casey forwarded me yet another unsettling development. The detective had called her, his voice conveying a mix of urgency and caution, to report a newly discovered piece of evidence, a voice memo found on Lauren's phone. This audio file, according to Lauren's claims, was purportedly my voice, threatening to destroy her life if she dared to marry Conrad. The detective was sending it over for official analysis, but his wording was clear and unsettling. He admitted it sounded pretty convincing. The implication was chilling another fabricated piece of evidence, designed to turn the tables. Casey, ever the sharp legal mind, didn't hesitate. She immediately demanded the original file, not just a copy, understanding that the integrity of the evidence was paramount. Only the original, unadulterated file would allow Corey, our digital forensics expert, to examine it properly, to peel back the layers of potential manipulation and uncover the truth. As soon as that crucial audio file arrived, digitally pristine and ripe for scrutiny, Corey wasted no time. He immediately got to work on the audio file at Casey's office, plunging into the intricate world of sound waves and digital signatures. Our hopes once again resting on his ability to expose the insidious hand of forgery. When our expert, Corey, meticulously pulled up the intricate layers of metadata embedded within the contested audio file, his eyes immediately fixated on a glaring anomaly, the creation timestamp. It revealed that the file had been fabricated a mere 2 days prior to the wedding. A suspiciously tight window that instantly screamed orchestrated. A deeper forensic analysis of the audio's wave patterns unveiled a disquieting tapestry of inconsistencies, particularly where the subtle, ambient background noise would abruptly shift, morphing from one acoustic environment to another without any logical or natural transition. Much like a badly patched quilt of sound, he painstakingly isolated different sonic layers, and the evidence was unequivocal. Blatant voice slicing. This wasn't merely an edit. It was an elaborate collage where individual words, syllables even, had been meticulously cut from disparate source recordings and then Frankenstein stitched together. The very modulation patterns of the alleged speaker's voice didn't align with natural human speech, lacking the organic ebbs and flows we instinctively recognize. Furthermore, clear digital artifacts, telltale signatures of artificial intelligence, confirmed the use of sophisticated AI voice generation software. Corey, with absolute conviction, stated he possessed undeniable proof, capable of withstanding any cross-examination in court, that this entire audio clip was a complete fabrication, meticulously constructed using at least 3 distinct source recordings and a powerful AI voice tool. Upon receiving this damning evidence, Casey wasted no time. She immediately filed it with the court, simultaneously initiating the urgent process to subpoena Lauren's phone carrier records. She explained, her voice tinged with a blend of legal pragmatism and a touch of warning, that procuring the actual call logs and the accompanying metadata, the precise digital breadcrumbs we desperately needed, would likely take at least 3 agonizing weeks. Every single day that bled into the next felt like an eternity, an entire month compressed into 24 hours, as we were trapped in this unbearable limbo of waiting. How could I possibly sleep properly, find any semblance of peace, knowing that Lauren was still out there unchecked, relentlessly weaving and spreading her venomous lies about me? Casey, ever the stoic advocate, kept reiterating the fundamental truth. Constructing an ironclad, unassailable legal case demands painstaking time and meticulous effort. A mere 2 days into this excruciating wait, a surprising development unfolded. Casey forwarded me an email, prominently marked confidential, which originated from Lauren's father. His message contained a startling admission. 5 years ago, Lauren had been involved in a deeply troubling incident with a neighbor's child. Following this, the entire family had abruptly relocated to another state, effectively vanishing from their previous community. Now, however, he was willing to provide more specific details, but only on the condition of receiving full legal immunity. Casey, outlining the complexities of the situation, explained that securing any form of immunity deal would necessitate the express approval of the prosecutor, a bureaucratic process that, like everything else, could itself consume weeks of precious time. The restraining order hearing was the first official step in court, and a flicker of desperate hope ignited within me. I truly believed, against all odds, that we would finally secure some form of official protection. Casey, leveraging her sharp legal acumen, passionately argued that I had never, not once, threatened Lauren. My actions, she asserted, were solely driven by an instinctual, unwavering need to defend my son from what was clearly documented abuse. Yet, the judge, seated high above us, seemed to barely cast a cursory glance at the carefully compiled mountain of our evidence. With an almost dismissive air, he swiftly issued mutual no-contact orders. His justification was delivered with a somber tone. Given the serious allegations on both sides, he intoned, he was being cautious. I wanted to unleash a guttural scream right there in the courtroom, to articulate the truth that burned within me. Being cautious, truly cautious, meant safeguarding innocent children from harm, not effectively shielding their abuser by drawing a false equivalence. Meanwhile, Tommy underwent his crucial medical examination at the Children's Hospital. The doctor, a compassionate yet undeniably constrained professional, indeed found evidence consistent with abuse. However, the language she employed in her report was so meticulously careful, so painstakingly neutral, that it churned my stomach. She used euphemistic terms like findings suggestive of trauma and injuries consistent with reported mechanism, instead of simply directly stating the undeniable truth that we all knew in our hearts. While the forthcoming report would undoubtedly bolster our case, it felt as though no one, not the doctor, not the system, was willing to utter the actual, damning words of abuse. Then, a small but significant breakthrough. Casey received an unexpected call from a police officer who had been diligently reviewing the body camera footage recorded at the wedding. In a stroke of pure serendipity, he had uncovered a crucial audio snippet, Lauren, captured on tape, conversing with her mother shortly after my son had hit her. On the recording, crystal clear amidst the background chatter, you could distinctly hear Lauren utter the chilling phrase, "Those photos shouldn't matter," immediately before her mother's swift, emphatic shush silenced her. Casey, recognizing the immense evidentiary value, immediately requested a certified copy and promptly filed it as pivotal evidence in both ongoing cases. She carefully outlined her strategic approach. Her primary objective was to defend me vigorously against the false accusations, meticulously separating that defense from my son's distinct and separate assault case. Two different legal tracks, she warned, inevitably meant double the demanding work, double the emotional toll, and unequivocally, double the escalating cost. She looked me squarely in the eye, her expression serious, as she cautioned that this journey would be both staggeringly expensive and utterly exhausting. But we had, she concluded, absolutely no other choice. I had already bled $8,000 from my dwindling savings, and this, she grimly reminded me, was just the beginning. That same devastating week, I received formal notification from my military command, a chilling official document that felt like a death knell to my career. My security clearance, the very bedrock of my military service, was formally suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. The implication was crushing. Even if I were to be completely exonerated, this suspension would irrevocably extinguish any lingering chance of promotion, effectively capping my career. 15 years of perfect, unblemished service, dedicated to my country, were being systematically destroyed by the malicious lies of one predatory individual. My commanding officer, a man I deeply respected, called me personally to convey his unwavering belief in my innocence, but his voice was heavy with regret as he admitted his hands were tied. Protocol, an unyielding military beast, mandated immediate suspension for any accusation involving minors, regardless of the veracity or strength of the evidence. I had, in a single, brutal stroke, gone from actively training soldiers on the fields of Germany to sitting, utterly disoriented and unemployed, in my friend's living room. By then, Corey had triumphantly completed his full, exhaustive analysis of the fake voice memo. The timing of Lauren's father's sudden revelation about an old, undisclosed incident with a neighbor's child, contingent on receiving immunity, felt not just convenient, but outright suspicious. A rhetorical question hung heavy in the air, echoing in my mind. Why hadn't this critical information surfaced when his daughter was first arrested, instead of conveniently waiting until now, when our case was gaining momentum, to mention it? Corey's report provided irrefutable proof. The audio was a meticulously crafted fabrication, woven together from at least 3 distinct source recordings spliced seamlessly. The digital artifacts he identified were undeniable fingerprints, showcasing clear, damning evidence of sophisticated voice generation software. Furthermore, the creation timestamp embedded within the file's metadata contradicted Lauren's timeline entirely. It was precisely 2 days after she claimed I had supposedly left the message. He had meticulously compiled a detailed, highly technical report that Casey, with a rare flash of triumph, declared would utterly demolish their fabricated evidence in any court of law. The courts, I was learning with bitter clarity, moved with the ponderous pace of glaciers, and every agonizing day that dragged on was another day my innocent kids continued to suffer, caught in this cruel vortex. Simultaneously, the Child Protective Service's CPS evaluation process for Tommy's placement had begun, a necessary evil spurred by Conrad's parents' callous minimization of the abuse. The caseworker, a woman with a difficult but essential job, meticulously interviewed various family members, probing to determine if any relatives could genuinely provide a safe, stable home for Tommy. Her words sent a shiver down my spine when she mentioned the possibility that they might need to consider therapeutic foster care if no suitable family placement could be secured. The mere thought, a terrifying image, of Tommy being placed with complete strangers, utterly unknown individuals, made me physically ill, a profound nausea churning in my gut. Then, a call came from Conrad's sister, offering to take Tommy, but her offer was immediately poisoned by a cruel condition. Only if you admit you were lying, his brother, equally heartless, echoed the exact same sentiment. They all, every single one of them, wanted me to confess to fabricating everything, to recant the truth, before they would even consider extending any assistance. The CPS worker, recognizing the insidious manipulation, definitively stated that their conditional, emotionally abusive offers rendered them utterly unsuitable placements. She then began the daunting task of exploring Conrad's extended family, but the vast majority of them lived out of state, adding another layer of complex logistical hurdles. 3 agonizing weeks deep into this nightmarish ordeal, the unthinkable happened. Conrad, a terrifying phantom from my past, suddenly materialized at my friend Sarah's house, pounding on the door and demanding Tommy. My friend, Sarah, ever vigilant, saw his menacing truck pull up to the curb and, without a moment's hesitation, immediately dialed the police while simultaneously locking every single door and window, barricading us inside. I instinctively grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, and began recording video from the safety of the living room window. Conrad, his face contorted with rage, was literally pounding on the front door, his furious shouts echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Tommy is my son, this safety plan is illegal. I have parental rights. Inside, Tommy was curled up, a small, terrified ball, hiding in the bedroom closet, his sobs muffled and heartbreaking. My own son, bless his courageous heart, was desperately trying to comfort him. The police, commendably, arrived within 10 harrowing minutes. But by then, Conrad had already inflicted significant damage, kicking the front door with such force that he had cracked its sturdy wooden frame. They eventually made him leave, but to my utter frustration, they informed us that without an active restraining order, they were powerless to arrest him. Sarah, my incredible friend, had to immediately pay for a brand new door and had security cameras professionally installed that very same day, a testament to the lingering terror. Casey, with her characteristic urgency, filed emergency paperwork for a protective order, but the judge, citing an overburdened docket, wouldn't even hear it for another excruciating week. Every single night that followed, the sound of cars slowing down outside, their engines muttering in the darkness, would plunge us into a fresh wave of anxiety. Was it Conrad, returning to finish what he started? Tommy, tragically, started wetting the bed again and was plagued by terrifying nightmares of Lauren coming to get him, my son, who usually had a healthy appetite, stopped eating properly and tragically lost 12 pounds. My son, once so vibrant, had wasted away, losing an alarming amount of LBS in just 3 weeks. It was as if the very air he breathed was heavy with dread, and the crushing stress was systematically destroying both kids. All the while, the lumbering legal system, with its endless delays and bureaucratic knots, moved at a snail's pace, an agonizing crawl that mirrored the slow decay of our family's peace. Casey, ever the professional, kept offering reassuring words, saying we were building a strong case, a fortress of truth. Yet, I could only watch, helpless, as I could see my children falling apart, their spirits fracturing under the unbearable pressure. After an excruciating wait, the official phone records finally came back. They were supposed to be our vindication, a clear, undeniable testament to the truth. And indeed, the documentation showed unequivocally that Lauren had never received any calls from my number, a glimmer of hope, however brief. But her lawyer, a master of legal acrobatics, swiftly dismissed it, argued that didn't prove anything since I could have used a different phone. It was a flimsy excuse, a transparent deflection, yet legally, it cast a shadow of doubt, a reminder that in this arena, perception often trumped reality. Just 2 days later, the prosecutor, with the detached air of someone performing a routine duty, called a meeting at the courthouse. The room felt heavy with unspoken tension as he meticulously laid out my son's options, each word a hammer blow. Casey sat stoically next to us, her pen scratching rhythmically as she took notes, a quiet pillar of support amidst the storm. He pushed a stack of papers across the polished table, the stark print detailing how the assault charges could mean juvenile detention and chilling prospect, a future stolen behind bars. But then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned something called a diversion program, a fleeting mention that offered a fragile thread of hope, a potential path less punitive, less damaging to a young life. Casey, sensing the pivot, leaned forward, her voice a calm, reasoned counterpoint to the prosecutor's grim pronouncements. She started talking about counseling alternatives, painting a picture of rehabilitation and healing instead of punishment. Beside me, my son remained utterly silent and pale, his eyes vacant, as if he were a ghost observing his own fate. The prosecutor, however, seemed to have somewhere infinitely more important to be, kept checking his watch, a visible display of his impatience, his disinterest in the emotional wreckage before him. Unwavering, Casey pushed for therapy instead of any formal charges, advocating fiercely for a solution focused on recovery. And after what felt like an eternity of 40 minutes of back and forth, a grueling negotiation of legal and human concerns, they finally agreed to consider it, but only if my son completed a written statement about everything. The weight of that condition settled over us, a new and daunting task. That night, under the harsh glow of the kitchen light, my son sat at the kitchen table for 4 hours, a solitary figure hunched over paper, pouring out his tormented soul. He filled page after page about what Lauren did to him, each word a fragment of a nightmare. His hand, unused to such an intense outpouring, cramped up twice, forcing him to stop, to shake out the pain, only to return, compelled by the urgent need to tell his story. I had made him hot chocolate, a small offering of comfort, but he didn't touch it, lost in the harrowing landscape of his memories. When he finally lifted his head, exhausted and emotionally drained, he had produced 12 pages, front and back, describing every single thing she'd done, a raw, unfiltered chronicle of his suffering. He wrote about the chilling regularity with which she'd come into his room at night and touch him while he pretended to sleep, his small body rigid with terror, feigning slumber to escape a reality too horrifying to face. He documented the photos she made him take, the insidious control she exerted, and the manipulative threats she whispered, telling him nobody would believe him, severing his connection to truth and justice. He detailed the crushing moment he caught her with Tommy, the shattering realization that his world was being systematically dismantled, and how in that moment, he knew the wedding was his only chance to stop her, a desperate, last-ditch effort to reclaim his life. Reading it made me throw up twice in the bathroom, a visceral, uncontrollable reaction to the sheer depravity of what my son had endured. The sound of my retching was muffled, and heard by him as he finally collapsed, utterly spent, slept on the couch. The next morning, with a heavy heart, we drove Tommy to the Children's Advocacy Center for his interview. From the outside, the building presented a deceptive normalcy, looked like a regular house, deliberately designed to soothe and disarm. Inside, toys in the waiting room and bright paintings on the walls attempted to create a comforting facade, a thinly veiled attempt to soften the gravity of its purpose. They gently, but firmly, took Tommy back to a special room with cameras, a sterile environment designed for documentation and truth. I was left alone in the lobby, a silent sentinel, watching other parents stare at their phones, lost in their own anxieties, a shared burden of unspoken worrying hanging in the air. The interviewer, a professional with a carefully calibrated approach, was trained to talk to kids about abuse without making it worse for them, a delicate dance of empathy and information gathering. Despite their assurances that the room was soundproof, I could hear Tommy crying through the door, a piercing, heartbreaking sound that bypassed any barrier, signaling his profound distress. After what felt like an eternity, but was precisely 2 hours, they finally brought him out. His eyes, usually so bright, were downcast, haunted, and he wouldn't look at me, a clear sign of the deep trauma he'd relived. The interviewer then pulled Casey aside, her expression grim, and showed her the preliminary report on her tablet. The stark reality of the abuse was laid bare. The insidious grooming pattern had started 6 months ago with small boundary violations that got worse each week. Lauren, the report detailed, had psychologically choked him, telling Tommy it was their special secret and that bad things would happen if he told. The document provided irrefutable physical evidence, documented bruising, and multiple stages of healing, alongside the behavioral changes his teachers had noticed. A silent testament to his suffering. Casey, her face set with determination, confirmed that this report alone would strengthen the criminal case significantly, a formidable weapon in our fight for justice. That very afternoon, the detective, his office radiating a quiet authority, called me into his office. His tone was stern, a clear warning me about talking to Conrad's family. He explained the legal tightrope we were walking, stating that any coordination between witnesses could look like tampering, even if we were just checking on each other. The integrity of the case was paramount. Casey, ever vigilant, immediately took charge, instructing me that all communication had to go through her office from now on to avoid any appearance of interference. To ensure absolute transparency, she gave me a special email account to use only for case-related messages that she could monitor, a digital fortress around our legal communications. Just 2 days later, Casey, through her unwavering persistence, got a judge to sign an order for complete forensic imaging of Lauren's phone. This was a pivotal strategic maneuver. The specialized tech team would recover deleted files and hidden apps to find the real source of those fake messages, peeling back the digital layers to expose the truth. Lauren's lawyer, as expected, fought it for a week, saying it violated her privacy, but the scales of justice tipped in our favor, and the judge sided with us, granting access to the digital evidence that could break the case wide open. The phone company, after a bureaucratic delay, finally sent over the complete records, a voluminous stack of paper detailing every call and text from my phone for the past year. Casey, with meticulous precision, spread them out on her conference table and highlighted the relevant dates with a yellow marker. The results were stark, undeniable, and utterly damning for Lauren's claims. There were 0 messages to Lauren's number during any of the time she claimed I threatened her. Casey's expression was one of quiet triumph. She declared it our first solid piece of evidence that she was lying about the threats. Without hesitation, she filed it with the court that same afternoon, a powerful blow to Lauren's credibility. I sat in her office, a quiet observer of this small victory, nibbling on stale crackers from the vending machine, the mundane act of stark contrast to the monumental events unfolding. The next morning brought a bombshell. Corey, our tech expert, called Casey's office with big news about Lauren's phone. He had unearthed a sophisticated spoofing app hidden in a calculator folder, a digital chameleon designed for deception. Crucially, it was installed at 11:47 p.m. the night of the wedding. This timestamp was not merely a coincidence. It matched exactly when Lauren locked herself in the bathroom after we called the police, creating an undeniable link. The app, Corey explained, possessed the chilling capability to fake messages from any phone number and make them look real in screenshots, perfectly explaining the fabricated threats. Corey immediately sent over the technical report showing the installation timestamp and app history. Casey, recognizing the seismic impact of this discovery, immediately forwarded everything to the prosecutor, who called back within an hour. His swift response a clear indicator of the evidence's undeniable weight. The prosecutor's tone, while still cautiously official, had softened considerably. He confessed that he was becoming less interested in pursuing any charges against me given the mounting evidence, a significant shift in his perspective. However, he remained legally guarded, stating that he wouldn't formally close the investigation yet because that's how prosecutors protect themselves from lawsuits, a pragmatic defense mechanism. Casey, with her years of experience in the legal labyrinth, dismissed this as typical hedging and not to worrying about it. Her reassurances, however, did little to quell the gnawing unease in my gut. I couldn't sleep anyway, the relentless grip of worrying tightening its hold. 3 days later, my worst fears materialized in a terrifying digital onslaught. My phone started blowing up with notifications from numbers I didn't recognize, a cacophony of beeps and vibrations signaling a new and insidious threat. Someone, somewhere, had leaked details about the case online and posted my name and photo on social media. The initial barrage of messages started nice enough with people saying they supported me, a deceptive calm before the storm. but with sickening speed, they quickly turned dark. Within hours, death threats filled my voicemail, each chilling message a stark reminder of the digital mob's reach. People, fueled by misinformation and online fervor, found my work email and sent graphic descriptions of what they wanted to do to me, their words a torrent of vitriol. The harassment escalated to a terrifying real-world threat. Someone posted my friend's address where we were staying and said they were coming to burn it down. The virtual hatred had bled into our physical space. Casey, ever the strategist, sprang into action. She helped me screenshot everything and file police reports, documenting the digital terror, while we installed security cameras at my friend's house, creating a desperate digital fortress. The relentless harassment got so bad, I had to change my phone number twice in 1 week. The shadow of fear even fell upon the most innocent among us. My friend's kids were scared to go to the school because cars kept driving slowly past the house taking pictures. Their childhood innocence shattered by anonymous threats. Recognizing the escalating danger, Casey took the decisive step of hiring a private security company, a stark testament to the terrifying reality we now faced. To patrol the neighborhood, their watchful presence a stark reminder of the ever-present threat, and they scored us a protective shield to those daunting court appearances. It was agonizing, feeling the pervasive chill of judgment, as the online mob, a faceless, nameless collective, had already rendered their verdict. Deciding I was undeniably guilty without so much as a whisper of the actual facts about the case, only a torrent of inflammatory rumors fueling their righteous fury. How could they possibly render such a damning verdict with absolutely no understanding of the nuances? Only a torrent of ill-informed outrage. 3 days later, a fragile, crumpled letter arrived, its envelope bearing Fenn's shaky handwriting, each trembling line of ink betraying her inner turmoil. She was finally reaching out, her belated apology etched onto the page, expressing sorrow for her initial failure to believe my son. It was a small, bittersweet olive branch. Potter, ever the fence sitter, sent a terse text message, a digital wall erected to keep emotional distance. He claimed he wasn't picking sides, a neutral stance that felt more like a retreat, but urgently needed space from the entire suffocating situation, a clear indication of his discomfort. Meanwhile, Conrad's parents, once a comforting presence, had completely ceased answering our calls or responding to our messages. Their chilling silence making us feel as if we had simply ceased to exist in their world, completely erased from their lives. The once tightly knit family was visibly splitting apart, unraveling thread by painful thread, with everyone choosing their own isolating way to handle the corrosive weight of the guilt that permeated the air. In a bittersweet turn of events, amidst this bureaucratic storm, Child Protective Services CPS arrived at my friend's house that very week. Their presence marked by official vehicles and thick binders of paperwork to discuss Tommy's placement. They delivered the news that he needed to stay in therapeutic foster care, a specialized environment designed for healing, and to our immense relief, my friend's family qualified. Having undergone the precise training required to provide such a nurturing space, this meant Tommy would get to stay exactly where he felt safe and loved, while simultaneously receiving the much-needed professional help for the unspeakable trauma that had befallen him. The social worker, showing remarkable empathy, thoughtfully brought a collection of soft toys and vibrant picture books, carefully placing them around the house to help him feel more at home. To soften the clinical edge of the intervention, my friend's kids, showing an incredible maturity and tenderness, were being incredibly gentle with him, patiently teaching him simple card games. Their soft voices and easy laughter a balm to his wounded spirit. 2 weeks of anxious waiting passed before Lauren's lawyer, in a calculated move, filed papers attempting to get my son's crucial photos thrown out as evidence. Her legal team, exploiting every possible loophole, claimed they were illegally obtained and therefore inadmissible, arguing they couldn't be used in court. This motion, a chilling legal tactic, meant my son, already so vulnerable, might have to endure the ordeal of testifying under oath about precisely how he acquired those photographs, further exposing him to the harsh glare of the legal system. Was there no limit to their attempts to discredit the truth and further traumatize a child? Casey, our legal champion, immediately sprang into action, her professional determination evident as she began meticulously preparing robust counterarguments, building a fortress of logic to demonstrate why the evidence should unequivocally stay. The hearing, a looming confrontation, was swiftly scheduled for the following month, with everyone involved legally required to appear. Meanwhile, a separate legal battle unfolded as my son had to navigate the somber halls of juvenile court for the assault charges. The judge, a stoic figure, meticulously looked at all the presented evidence, weighing not just actions, but potential. Instead of regular prosecution, which would have carried significant long-term consequences, he mercifully offered my son a diversion program, a narrow bridge over the turbulent waters of a criminal record. This challenging path required him to attend therapy twice a week, a consistent commitment to healing, and complete 60 hours of community service at the local animal shelter, fostering empathy and responsibility. If he completed everything successfully, his record would miraculously stay clean, offering a genuine second chance. My son, his young face a mask of silent acceptance, simply nodded and signed the papers, his profound silence speaking volumes of his internal struggle and the weight of this new responsibility. That same tumultuous week, the military called me, their crisp, official voice delivering news that felt like another blow. An administrative board hearing had been convened. They gravely informed me that the relentless negative publicity surrounding the case was not only affecting unit morale but, astonishingly, base security itself. My long-standing security clearance, once a given, was now under intense review. A fragile thing suddenly deemed vulnerable. and they were even questioning my humanitarian leave status, a precious lifeline during this family crisis. And my mind raced back to that crucial moment. Why did Lauren wait until she was locked in the bathroom to install that spoofing app? Could that timing possibly be coincidental? Or was it a calculated move, a desperate, premeditated plan be designed to launch if her wedding day drama didn't unfold precisely as she wished? The question hung heavy, pregnant with suspicion. I was then tasked with the arduous, soul-draining burden of submitting pages upon pages of meticulous documentation, explaining every agonizing detail that had transpired. The hearing, a sword of Damocles dangling precariously, was scheduled for 3 weeks out, my entire career hanging precariously in the balance. During the intensely focused suppression hearing, the judge, a keen observer of details, kept methodically pressing Lauren's lawyer, repeatedly demanding clarity on the glaring technical problems plaguing her supposed phone evidence against me. Corey, with his meticulous forensic eye, had unearthed damning discrepancies, crucial timestamps that simply didn't align, and undeniable metadata revealing the key files were, inexplicably, created after Lauren had conveniently locked herself in that bathroom. The lawyer, a picture of increasing discomfort, stammered and equivocated, his explanations unraveling like a cheap suit as he tried in vain to reconcile the stark inconsistencies. The judge's frown deepened with each faltering word, his pen scratching diligent notes, a silent but powerful indictment of the lawyer's flimsy arguments. Lauren, meanwhile, perched rigidly at the defense table, her nervousness palpable. Though the physical bruises on her face had long since faded, her fingers kept drifting to her cheek, a ghost of a touch, as if the phantom pain still lingered, a constant, unsettling reminder of her narrative. After 3 grueling hours of testimony, the courtroom air, thick with exhausted tension, finally thinned when the judge announced his decision would follow within 2 weeks, leaving us suspended in anxious anticipation. In a monumental shift, CPS concluded their exhaustive investigation, delivering a verdict that resonated with grim satisfaction and profound sadness. They officially found Lauren guilty of abusing both boys, a definitive end to months of uncertainty. Moreover, Conrad was formally cited for failure to protect his children from a known threat, a heavy label carrying significant consequences for his oversight. His mandate included attending weekly parenting classes for 6 months, a public acknowledgement of his responsibilities. And the existing safety plan for the children was not only extended for another half year but fortified with the addition of surprise home visits, ensuring continuous oversight and accountability. Surprisingly, Conrad began attending the mandated parenting classes with an unexpected quiet diligence, not a single complaint escaping his lips. He'd sit diligently in the back row, his brow furrowed in concentration as he meticulously took notes, even raising his hand to ask poignant questions about the warning signs he'd missed, a stark indication of his dawning realization and self-reflection. A palpable shift was occurring within him. His initial anger, once directed squarely at us, was slowly but irrevocably pivoting towards Lauren as each new piece of damning evidence surfaced, illuminating her culpability. He even took hesitant steps toward mending fences, his first overtures arriving in the form of short, clipped emails inquiring about Tommy's well-being. A fragile bridge beginning to form between our once estranged families. One morning, I awoke to a digital nightmare. Dozens of Facebook messages flooded my inbox, hurled from a legion of unfamiliar, anonymous accounts. Each message was a venomous dart, spewing vile accusations and horrible things about both me and my son. What made it truly chilling, however, were the insidious details woven into their fabric intimate, obscure facts that only Lauren could possibly possess, betraying her hidden hand behind the anonymous screens, a clear attempt to harass and intimidate. Casey, ever the vigilant protector, immediately swung into action, her professional calm a stark contrast to my shock. Meticulously documenting every single message, a digital forensics expert in her own right. Her investigation was swift and precise, tracing the elusive IP addresses not to some random internet cafe, but directly back to Lauren's own apartment building, leaving no doubt as to the orchestrator of this latest campaign of harassment. With irrefutable evidence in hand, we promptly filed contempt charges against Lauren. Her orchestration of this online mob was a blatant, calculated violation of the no-contact order, an attempt to weaponize her supposed friends against us. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the transgression, swiftly scheduled an emergency hearing, the stark possibility of revoking her bail now a very real threat. Her freedom hanging by a thread, Lauren, ever cunning and attempting to evade responsibility, appeared with a different lawyer, a fresh face brought in to spin a tired narrative. He tried valiantly to argue that she bore no responsibility for what her friends chose to do, painting her as an innocent bystander. But Casey was prepared. Armed with undeniable digital proof, logs and data showing that Lauren herself had been directly logged into those very fake accounts, dismantling her flimsy defense with cold, hard facts. My son began his trauma therapy, a courageous journey into the quiet, fractured landscape of his inner world. For the first 3 sessions, a profound silence enveloped him. He wouldn't talk, simply sitting there, his small hands meticulously drawing pictures of birds and trees on the paper. A silent testament to his internal refuge, while the therapist waited with unwavering patience, a quiet anchor in his storm. The breakthrough, when it finally came on the 4th session, was a whisper, yet it echoed with immense pain. Laying bare a deep wound, I feel dirty all the time. Just one sentence, but it conveyed a profound sense of shame and contamination. The therapist, with remarkable insight and empathy, gently offered him special soap, a tangible tool, a symbolic act of cleansing, to combat those overwhelming feelings when they became too strong. A way to regain a sense of control. Slowly, painstakingly, week by week, he began to speak a few more words about what happened, fragments of his trauma tentatively emerging into the light. Occasionally, the weight of the memories would become too much, and he'd stop mid-sentence, retreating back into the comforting, silent world of his bird drawings, a quiet defense mechanism. The therapist, ever calm and reassuring, reiterated that this was normal, a natural rhythm of processing, and that healing would take time, a long, winding path that required patience and perseverance. Tommy, in his own separate but equally vital therapy, was showing encouraging signs of progress. For him, healing found its voice through play dolls, allowing him to subtly show what happened in a way that words couldn't yet convey. His therapist carefully observing and documenting everything for the criminal case, each session a crucial piece of the larger puzzle. My friend's family continued to be an amazing bedrock of support, their unconditional love and gentle care clearly making a profound difference in his recovery. And in the most heartwarming of developments, Tommy had started smiling again, sometimes small, tentative bursts of genuine joy that were like sunshine breaking through the clouds. A hopeful sign of his resilience. The military board, a tribunal of solemn faces, meticulously reviewed all my documents, poring over every detail, and listened intently to the powerful testimony from Casey which systematically dismantled the false allegations leveled against me. Their verdict, when it came, was a complex blend of relief and apprehension. They agreed to extend my humanitarian leave, a much-needed reprieve, but stipulated that I would be placed on administrative duty upon my return, a clear shift from my usual, more active role. Crucially, my security clearance stayed intact, a major victory that preserved my career path. Yet it came with the caveat that it would be reviewed again in 6 months, leaving a lingering sense of uncertainty, a probationary period. In a long overdue, tentative step, Conrad's parents finally sent one email. It was brief, almost hesitant, stating only that they needed time to process everything. But buried within those few lines was a monumental admission. They should have listened when my son first spoke up, a painful acknowledgement of their past blindness and regret, a tacit apology. Potter, too, began a slow, cautious re-entry, texting again, cautiously asking if the boys needed anything, a tentative probe for connection. His outreach soon manifested in tangible, if impersonal, gestures, gift cards for clothes and toys arrived, a material offering that was, however, a clear substitute for the emotional courage he still lacked. He still couldn't face us in person, the chasm of their discomfort and guilt still too wide to bridge directly. The sprawling branches of our family, fractured and reeling, were now slowly trying to figure out how to move forward with all this guilt, a heavy, unspoken burden shared by many, each grappling with their own role and remorse, attempting to navigate the complex emotional landscape. A new chapter began a mere 3 days later when the school called, a welcome boys amidst the chaos, to discuss setting up my son's return. We gathered in a sterile conference room, the air thick with formality, facing the principal, two dedicated counselors, and the special education coordinator, a team assembled to support his transition. Their language was measured and empathetic, peppered with reassuring phrases like trauma-informed approach and modified schedule, designed to ease his re-entry, while my hands busied themselves, almost mechanically, filling out stacks of paperwork, each form a brick in the path back to normalcy. The plan was gentle, a gradual reintroduction. My son would start with half days, a careful step back into the world he had been so violently pulled from, ensuring he wouldn't be overwhelmed. He would gradually transition to a full-time schedule, building up his stamina and focus over a carefully structured 6-week period. This phased approach was designed to ease him back into the academic routine without overwhelming his already fragile state. Dedicated support was promised, with a school counselor committed to checking in on him not just once, but twice daily, a reassuring presence each morning to help him start the day, and another in the afternoon to gauge his emotional well-being and provide an immediate outlet for any anxieties or difficulties he might encounter. Furthermore, he was guaranteed critical accommodations, extended time for all assessments, acknowledging the cognitive strain he was under, and the invaluable option to quietly step out of the classroom should the sheer weight of his emotions or academic pressure become too much to bear. Imagine the relief of knowing you have an escape hatch when the world feels like it's closing in. The principal, with a practiced, earnest expression, promised absolute discretion, emphasizing that every detail would be held in the strictest confidence. Yet, a cynical knot tightened in my stomach. I've navigated enough institutional bureaucracies to understand the stark reality: a school, for all its good intentions, is often a leaky vessel when it comes to sensitive information, a breeding ground for whispers. And just as I suspected, even before we'd fully exited the building, the telltale signs were already there. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of teachers huddled in the hallway, their voices hushed, heads bowed in conspiratorial whispers. The confidentiality they championed felt like a cruel joke, already dissolving into the rumor mill. Later that very afternoon, as if the day hadn't delivered enough blows, a notification on my phone prompted me to check my email. It was the email, the one announcing the long-awaited, highly anticipated promotion list had finally been posted. A fresh wave of apprehension, tinged with a desperate hope, washed over me. My heart pounded as I scrolled, my gaze scanning name after name. 15 years of dedicated service, 15 years of watching my peers, some of whom I've mentored, others I've served alongside in the crucible of deployment, see their accomplishments recognized. Their names emblazoned on that list, But despite my fervent searching, meticulously checking every entry, my name, the one I had poured my life into earning, was conspicuously absent. It simply wasn't there, a cold, hard fact that hit with the force of a physical blow. My commanding officer had, with a solemn expression, offered a prescient warning, preparing me for this very outcome. He'd laid it out plainly. This incident would carry consequences. But even with that foreknowledge, seeing the stark truth of it laid bare, my chest tightened into a vice, a painful constriction that stole my breath. All those grueling deployments, the sacrifices, the untold hours, the perfect evaluations meticulously earned and documented over a career dedicated to duty, all of it, seemingly rendered meaningless, reduced to nothing by a single, shattering incident. An incident, I might add, that was never, ever my fault. A cruel twist of fate that felt profoundly unjust. With a profound sense of despair, I slammed my laptop shut, the click echoing the finality of the moment. I desperately tried to push away the encroaching thoughts of the thousands of retirement points, the future security and recognition I had meticulously built towards. That now seemed irrevocably lost, forever beyond my grasp. Then, 2 agonizing days later, just as I was beginning to grapple with the seismic shift in my career, the mail delivered yet another blow. A crisp, certified letter, its official nature unmistakable, arrived from a lawyer representing Lauren's family. My stomach lurched. What fresh hell awaited us now? The contents were chilling. They demanded we sign non-disclosure agreements, legally binding documents designed to silence us permanently. The alternative, a staggering $1 million defamation lawsuit, a sum so immense it felt like a deliberate, crushing tactic to financially ruin us, to drown us in legal fees and despair. The letter audaciously claimed that we had, in fact, irrevocably damaged Lauren's reputation through false accusations. The sheer audacity of this reversal of victim and aggressor left me reeling. A bitter taste in my mouth. Without a moment's hesitation, my fingers fumbled for my phone. I immediately dialed Casey, the lawyer my friend had so confidently recommended, describing her as a tenacious legal eagle with a compassionate heart. Someone who might just be our beacon in this storm. To my surprise, as I painstakingly read the menacing contents of the letter aloud, a clear, confident laugh erupted from Casey's end of the line. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of pure, unadulterated defiance, a sound that instantly cut through my anxiety like a sharp blade. Her voice, now firm and imbued with a palpable sense of resolve, delivered her immediate, razor-sharp assessment. They're scared. This isn't strength, this is pure, unadulterated desperation playing its hand. True to her word, that same afternoon, Casey met me at a bustling coffee shop, the scent of roasted beans filling the air. She arrived not empty-handed, but with an impressive, formidable stack of her own documents, each sheet representing hours of meticulous, proactive research she'd already undertaken. Before I even had a chance to explain further, she revealed her diligent groundwork. She had already managed to pull Lauren's arrest record and, even more critically, the Child Protective Service's CPS reports. It was a testament to her swift action and profound understanding of the stakes, demonstrating she was not just listening, but already fighting. Setting her jaw with fierce determination, she declared, her voice resonating with conviction, "We are absolutely not signing anything that silences these boys. That stifles their truth. Their voices are paramount. They are their most potent weapon for justice." With a keen, analytical eye, I watched as she meticulously highlighted section after section of the opposing side's proposed agreement, her red pen a weapon of scrutiny against their calculated legalese. Then, she pointed to a particularly insidious clause, her voice laced with incredulity. "Look at this. They want the boys to never speak about the abuse, not just publicly, but even in the sanctuary of therapy." Can you imagine? They're attempting to seal away their trauma, to prevent them from ever truly healing, from processing what they endured, with a decisive, sweeping motion. She crossed out entire pages of their carefully crafted document with her bold red pen, each stroke a visual declaration of our unwavering refusal to comply with such egregious demands. Over the ensuing week, Casey engaged in an intense, protracted dance with their lawyers, a strategic back-and-forth negotiation that showcased her relentless tenacity and sharp legal mind. Their desperation became increasingly apparent, evidenced by their escalating financial offers. First, a paltry $50,000 to make everything disappear, then a quick jump to $100,000, and finally, a more substantial $200,000 each offer, a desperate attempt to buy our silence, to make this inconvenient truth vanish. But with each successive offer, Casey's response remained resolute, an unyielding refrain. My clients want justice, not a payout. Their integrity and the well-being of these children are not for sale. The opposing lawyer, clearly frustrated by Casey's unwavering resolve, resorted to a nastier, more aggressive tactic, threatening to bury us in legal fees, a common but often effective intimidation strategy designed to exhaust and bankrupt families fighting for what's right. Casey, however, didn't even flinch. Her composure was absolute. With a steady gaze, she simply uttered 2 words laden with a quiet challenge, "Try it." Then, she delivered her trump card, a crucial piece of information designed to deflate their financial threats. I work on contingency for abuse cases. This revelation meant their attempts to bleed us dry through hourly billing were utterly irrelevant to her. With a decisive motion, she slid a counter-proposal across the polished table, her terms clear and unyielding. Criminal prosecution moves forward. There will be no non-disclosure agreements, and absolutely no money changes hands. This isn't about profit, it's about accountability. The opposing lawyer's face flushed a deep, indignant red, a clear sign of his fury and frustration at being outmaneuvered. Yet, despite his visible anger, he grudgingly reached out and took the papers, acknowledging, however unwillingly, the formidable force he was up against. Meanwhile, as Casey continued her relentless legal battle, the focus shifted briefly back to the criminal side of things. The prosecutor called, her voice tinged with a weariness I'd come to recognize, to deliver an update on Lauren's case. The news was a gut punch. Lauren had been offered a mere 18 months in exchange for a plea to misdemeanor assault. Misdemeanor, the word itself felt like an insult, a gross underestimation of the magnitude of her heinous acts. My stomach plummeted, a sickening sensation that left me breathless. Misdemeanor. The word echoed in my mind, a stark, painful contrast to the unforgivable truth. She had molested two innocent children. How could such a profound violation be reduced to a misdemeanor? The prosecutor, her voice heavy with the weight of bureaucratic battles, sounded utterly exhausted. She explained, almost apologetically, her attorney is good. Very good. Their defense, she elaborated, hinged on claiming the evidence, despite its undeniable implications, was merely circumstantial, a legal loophole they were exploiting with cunning precision. She detailed how Lauren's lawyer was relentlessly filing motion after motion, a barrage of legal maneuvers designed solely to obfuscate, delay, and ultimately, to get crucial evidence thrown out of court. Among their targets, the grim reality. We're looking at trial in 8 months minimum, he stated, a timeline that stretched out before us like an agonizingly long, dark tunnel. The courts, he explained, were simply backed up, a systemic flaw that only served to compound our distress and prolong our suffering. 8 months. 8 months of agonizing, endless waiting, of legal bills relentlessly piling up, a relentless financial drain. 8 months of my brave son being forced to relive this horrifying ordeal, to repeatedly recount his trauma, tearing open wounds that desperately needed to heal. That night, around 11 o'clock, just as the house had settled into a fragile silence, the shrill ring of my phone shattered the quiet. My heart jumped. It was Tommy, his small, tremulous voice a familiar, painful harbinger of distress coming through the line. Through his quiet sobs, he choked out the words that pierced my soul. I can't sleep. She's in my dreams. The abuser, a phantom menace, still haunted his innocent slumber, stealing his peace. The sound of his stifled cries, heartbreakingly audible even over the phone, twisted my gut. There's no pain quite like hearing your child suffer, feeling utterly helpless to shield them from the shadows in their mind. Immediately, I guided him through the calming breathing exercises his dedicated therapist had painstakingly taught him, a simple, yet profoundly effective tool to anchor him when anxiety threatened to consume him. Slowly, deliberately, I instructed, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, a rhythmic mantra, a steady beat against the chaos in his young mind. We performed it together, a shared ritual of comfort for what felt like an eternity, but was likely around 10 minutes. Gradually, miraculously, his ragged breathing began to steady, a tentative peace settling over him. Conrad, who had been listening intently, then briefly took the phone, his voice heavy with apparent weary resignation. This happens every night now. Every single night, he added another heartbreaking detail, a clear indicator of Tommy's deep-seated anxiety. He won't sleep in his own bed anymore. The sanctuary of his room had been tainted. Fear displacing comfort. First thing the following morning, even before the sun had fully risen, I was on the phone to Tommy's therapist, explaining the escalating nightmares and requesting an emergency session. This couldn't wait. Thankfully, understanding the gravity of the situation, she compassionately fed him in that very afternoon, a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. 3 long, arduous weeks crawled by, each day a slow march towards the inevitable. Finally, the day of my son's juvenile court date arrived, another daunting milestone in this exhausting journey. The judge, a stern but attentive figure, meticulously reviewed Tommy's extensive therapy attendance records, noting his unwavering commitment to healing, and carefully read through the detailed reports submitted by his dedicated counselor. Every session, every effort, was being weighed. Crucially, the records unequivocally showed that my son had shown up to every single session, a testament to his resilience and his earnest desire to navigate his trauma. Based on the compelling evidence of his proactive engagement, the judge officially approved his diversion program, a chance for rehabilitation rather than formal punishment, but not without imposing a set of clear, actionable conditions. Among them, a requirement for 100 hours of community service to be completed at the local animal shelter, a gentle, therapeutic environment where he could give back and find solace in the unconditional love of animals. Additionally, weekly therapy for a full year was mandated, ensuring he would continue to receive the professional support vital for his long-term emotional recovery and healing. And to ensure accountability and continued progress, monthly check-ins with a probation officer were also required, a structured framework to monitor his journey. Crucially, a strict no-contact order was issued, unequivocally prohibiting any interaction with Lauren or her family, a vital protective measure to safeguard his emotional and physical safety. My son, with a quiet dignity that belied his young age, simply nodded in earnest acknowledgement at each and every requirement, accepting his responsibilities without protest. The judge, her voice softened but firm, reminded him of the profound significance of this opportunity. This is your chance, she emphasized, to avoid a permanent record, a clean slate for your future. That very weekend, eager to begin the path forward, we started his community service at the animal shelter, embracing the opportunity with a collective sense of purpose. There, amidst the barks and purrs, I watched my son, my brave boy, diligently cleaning kettles, his small hands carefully scrubbing, and gently walking dogs, his face illuminated by the simple joy of their companionship. To an outsider observing him with such serenity and dedication, you would never, ever know the profound trauma he had so recently endured. His resilience was a quiet marvel. The animals, sensing his gentle spirit, gravitated towards him instantly, showering him with unconditional affection. Their immediate love was a balm to his wounded soul, a testament to the healing power of connection. The very next morning, a hopeful call from Casey brightened the otherwise heavy atmosphere. Her voice, typically calm, now carried an unmistakable tremor of excitement as she shared some truly good news. She announced, with a palpable sense of accomplishment, "I filed a motion to get Lauren's previous therapy records. It was a brilliant, strategic move designed to unearth hidden patterns and provide crucial context." Lauren's family, as expected, fiercely fought against this, vociferously claiming privacy rights as their shield. But Casey, ever the legal strategist, had anticipated this. She had unearthed a powerful precedent, a legal pathway specifically tailored for abuse cases involving pattern behavior, giving us a critical advantage. And just like that, after careful deliberation, the judge sided with us, acknowledging the compelling legal argument Casey had presented. Consequently, the highly sought-after records from Lauren's previous therapist, located all the way in Michigan, were now officially being sent over. A treasure trove of potential insight making its way to us. Casey's voice, usually so composed, now had an undeniable edge of raw excitement, a flicker of fierce determination. There might be other victims, she whispered, the gravity of the possibility hanging in the air. The implications were immense, stretching far beyond our immediate family. Within 2 weeks, she promised, the contents of those crucial records would be revealed, potentially unlocking a broader truth and shedding light on a darker history we hadn't yet fully grasped. As if balancing the good with the bad, that very same day, another summons arrived. I was called into my commander's office, a familiar, foreboding request that always signaled serious business. There, prominently displayed on his polished desk, lay the stark reality of my military career's new trajectory, the formal reprimand, a document that would forever stain my record. The charge, conduct, and becoming for the negative attention brought to the unit. The bitter irony was not lost on me. I was being reprimanded for being the victim of circumstances, for having had trauma inflicted upon my family, which then, somehow, became my fault for bringing attention, while I understood intellectually that it was the lightest possible punishment. A calculated move to simply check the box. Its emotional impact was no less devastating. It landed like a heavy, unexpected punch to the gut, winded me completely. My commander, his gaze averted, visibly squirmed with discomfort as I picked up the pen to sign the damning document. Even he, a man of hardened military resolve, found this act difficult, a testament to the inherent unfairness of the situation. He offered a quiet, almost defeated explanation. "I fought for you. Believe me, this was the absolute best I could do under the circumstances." His words, though meant to reassure, only underscored the powerlessness of the individual against the rigid dictates of the system. The weight of its permanence pressed down on me. This reprimand would forever reside in my official file, an indelible mark against my name, a black stain on an otherwise exemplary career. Any promotion board, any selection committee, any group tasked with reviewing my record would inevitably see it, a red flag that would instantly negate years of dedicated service and sacrifice. In that moment, it became blindingly clear. My military career, as I had envisioned it, had effectively, unequivocally ended. Even if I could somehow stay in, the path to advancement, to true contribution and recognition, was now irrevocably closed off, leaving only a hollow shell of what once was. I walked out of his office, the sterile fluorescent lights casting a cold glow on my grim realization. I would never, ever make rank again. The ceiling of my ambitions had been slammed shut, permanently. The ensuing days blurred into an exhausting, relentless cycle. Lawyer meetings dissecting every legal nuance, therapy appointments attempting to mend shattered psyches, and school conferences striving to maintain some semblance of academic normalcy. Each day was a whirlwind of emotional and logistical demands. It felt as if every single step forward, every small victory, was immediately countered by 2 steps back, an exhausting Sisyphean struggle. Yet, we relentlessly pushed on, because what other choice did we truly have? What else could we possibly do but put one foot in front of the other, propelled by an unwavering, fierce love? Our boys, more than anyone, desperately needed whatever semblance of normalcy we could possibly provide, a fragile illusion of stability amidst the storm. Even if that normal was now a heartbreaking tapestry woven with the threads of regular counselor visits, the intimidating grandeur of courtrooms, and the terrifying, relentless nightmares that haunted their innocent sleep, this was our new, brutal reality. 3 weeks later, Conrad himself began therapy, a mandatory requirement woven into his custody agreement with Child Protective Services. The ripple effects of Lauren's actions continued to spread, touching every corner of our lives. Through my lawyer, I received a copy of the therapist's report, a raw, unflinching account of what Conrad had finally, painfully, brought himself to admit during his session. He had sat in that sterile office, the weight of his guilt palpable, finally admitting that he had, in fact, noticed Lauren getting too close to the boys. A disturbing pattern that had begun months before their wedding. The truth, long suppressed, was now spilling out. He recounted specific, unsettling observations, the lingering touch on my son's shoulder, a touch that extended just a fraction too long. The way she would sit uncomfortably close to them during family movie nights. An intimacy that now, in retrospect, screamed predatory intent. Every single word, every painful confession, was meticulously documented by the therapist, then promptly and dutifully sent directly to CPS, an essential, non-negotiable component of Conrad's structured treatment plan. There was no hiding from this truth now. And just as these profound admissions were coming to light, the phone rang again. Lauren's parents, fueled by their own desperate agenda, had made an unscheduled appearance at my lawyer's office, ready to continue their relentless, misguided fight. The air in the room practically crackled with unspoken tension when they arrived the next week, not just with their own attorney, but prominently, conspicuously, with a check. A tangible peace offering. A cold, hard sum of money designed to make Tommy's civil claims simply vanish. Swallowed quietly without a single court filing that would ever dare to make unwelcome headlines or stain their pristine reputations. Could anything be more transparent than their desperate attempt to bury this, to make it disappear as if it had never happened? The settlement papers themselves, meticulously drafted and legally binding, guaranteed Tommy would receive comprehensive therapy, fully paid, all the way through his 21st birthday, with absolutely no limits on the number of sessions. A small, cold comfort perhaps, but a vital lifeline for a shattered young boy, a promise of unfettered access to healing, unburdened by the usual insurance constraints that often truncate a child's path to recovery. Yet, in the same breath, their lawyer made us sign additional papers, a non-disclosure agreement, a legally enforced gag order, explicitly stating we couldn't speak about the financial sum to anyone. Ever, another layer of silence, a shroud drawn over the monetary details, as if the price of their perceived peace was a perpetual quietude. Later, in a very different setting, Lauren's lawyer seemed to stumble through his explanations about the damning phone evidence, every hesitating word. Every carefully timed pause from her counsel felt less like genuine struggle and more like a meticulously choreographed act. And there sat Lauren herself, her fingers constantly touching her face, a gesture that, rather than conveying genuine distress, struck me as such a calculated performance. Was this merely an attempt to project an image of vulnerability, a subtle plea for leniency from the bench, or perhaps even a calculated distraction? It made me wonder, with a chill, if they had rehearsed this whole nervous act beforehand, perfecting every twitch and stutter, solely to gain sympathy from the judge during the hearing. My son eventually went back to school, armed with a safety plan that the counselor had patiently helped us write, a fragile shield against the unknown. Yet each step he took down the familiar corridors must have felt like navigating a minefield. Like a ripple spreading through a pond, the whispers followed him, snaking through the hallways, and at lunch, kids would visibly move away, leaving him in an isolating bubble of silence. We practiced breathing exercises in the car before school, a small, desperate ritual of preparation, but some mornings, the fear was too overwhelming. His small frame would simply tremble, a silent earthquake of terror, and he'd sit there shaking, unable to move. I'd have no choice but to call him in sick, and retry, with heavy hearts, again the next day. Then came the prosecutor's call, a sudden summons, a sense of foreboding filling the air as I stepped into her office. She sat me down, her expression grim, to show me what they'd found in Lauren's sealed therapy record. My breath hitched. 3 other kids from her past, a chilling pattern emerging from the shadows, had made similar reports, allegations that had been inexplicably buried by different therapists, silenced and ignored. It was as if a dark pattern was finally being unearthed, threads of past injustices woven into a chilling tapestry. A seismic shift occurred in that small office. The prosecutor withdrew the plea deal right there, her voice firm, and declared they were adding charges for each prior victim. A powerful, unyielding commitment to justice that sent a jolt of hope through me. Following this revelation, Casey, my own attorney, sat me down in her office. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, usually a comfort, now seemed to carry a hint of impending battle. She warned me, with a sober gaze, what was coming. Lauren's defense attorney, she explained, would ruthlessly attack everything about my military service, dissecting my character, and fiercely scrutinize how I raised my son. How could they twist a lifetime of dedication and sacrifice into a weapon against me? To prepare, we started doing grueling practice sessions. Casey grilled me relentlessly, like I was already on the witness stand, each session a trial by fire, a grueling simulation of the hostile interrogation I would inevitably face. She made me answer the same questions over and over, pushing me until I could finally stay calm, my composure unshakable, no matter what she asked, no matter how provocative. It was an exercise in emotional resilience, honing my demeanor until it became an impenetrable shield. Meanwhile, through CPS, Tommy's foster family sent precious updates, each one a lifeline tossed across the chasm of uncertainty, saying he was doing better each week. He still needed therapy twice a week, and the persistent shadows of his past, symbolized by the nightmares that still haunted his sleep, were present. Yet a powerful beacon of stability had emerged. His foster parents were utterly committed to keeping him. They told the social worker, a quiet promise yet one that resonated with the profound possibility of a forever home, that they would adopt him if Conrad's parental rights were terminated completely. My own son embarked on his community service at the domestic violence shelter downtown, a stark contrast to his own sheltered life, a raw, visceral experience. He helped sort through donations, tangible acts of kindness, and cleaned the playroom, a vibrant space where other kids stayed, their own small worlds temporarily paused. While their moms met with counselors, he became a quiet guardian of that space, a silent witness to the resilience of children much like himself. The coordinator at the shelter, observing his quiet dedication, remarked that working there seemed to help him understand profoundly that he wasn't alone in what had happened to him. That simple truth, so often elusive in the isolation of personal pain, began to sink in. Other kids had been hurt, too, and seeing their slow, courageous journeys towards healing helped him, in turn, believe that he, too, could heal. Their journeys, though distinct, mirrored aspects of his own, forming a powerful, unspoken pact of healing. I sat at my kitchen table after the boys finally went to bed, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. A stark counterpoint to the chaotic landscape of documents spread across the worn surface. Stacks of legal bills from Casey, each bill a fresh wound to my dwindling savings, mocked me, alongside the meticulously organized therapy schedules for both boys. A relentless calendar of appointments. Crimson circles on the calendar screamed important court dates, while CPS meeting notes, hastily scribbled, formed a constellation of concerns scattered everywhere. A weary marathon stretched ahead, the case promised to drag on for months more with depositions, nerve-wracking hearings, and invasive evaluations. An endless series of legal hurdles. But tonight, as I glanced down the quiet hallway, a profound wave of relief washed over me. Tonight, my son's steady breathing filled his own room, a sound infinitely more comforting than the clang of a jail cell door. And in another home, miles away, Tommy found solace and safety with people who cherished and protected him, a stark, healing contrast to the deafening silence of a house where his truth had been cruelly dismissed. That, I resolved, had to be enough for now. Could I ask for more, when these fragile glimmers of hope were the only true courtesy we possessed in this arduous wait for a flawed system to grind towards justice? Thanks for letting me wander along with you all today, sharing these deeply personal reflections. Doesn't it make you pause, perhaps, and consider the unseen battles others wage, the silent resilience that underpins so many lives? It really makes you look at things a little differently, doesn't it? Until we meet again in the shared space of reflection, I invite you, if these words resonated and you journeyed with me to this very end, to share your thoughts in a comment below. I truly love reading all your comments, each one a connection.